Hi, my name is Sarah, and what happened to me on that road trip changed me forever. I was sick of working non-stop, so I took my first vacation of my life. With a rebuilt Yamaha Zuma and a silly optimism, I crossed the western United States on an adventure that made me question everything I knew about the world. The journey had been a mix of emotions, the freedom of the open road, the wind whipping my face as I zigzagged through breathtaking landscapes, but also moments of solitude that made me reflect on my hectic life in the city. Each stop was a chance to unwind, but nothing prepared me for what was to come in those woods near Seattle. I loved Seattle, with its funky, hippie neighborhoods and the permanent carnival atmosphere at Pike Place Market. The troll on the bridge was the best. Who sees a bridge and thinks, "This needs a giant concrete troll"? I spent days exploring the city, sampling coffee at local coffee shops, walking along misty docks where the smell of the sea mixed with that of fresh fish. It was a perfect contrast to my daily routine. But eventually I had to keep moving, getting into the nature I longed for. Leaving Seattle was a nightmare. Constrained to back roads by an engine that didn't exceed 40 miles per hour, I got lost a dozen times despite the help of confused gas station attendants. So I was late to find my camp. The sun was setting faster than expected, dyeing the sky reddish hues that looked like ominous warnings. Each wrong turn added to my frustration, and the roar of the engine seemed to echo my growing anxiety. Eventually, I found the turnoff, but the road was getting rougher and rougher, with potholes shaking my bike as if the forest was trying to dissuade me. A few miles south and a little east of the city, there is a free camp. It is used a lot by horse riders, and you can tell by the smell. That guided me in the last kilometers. There is a gravel road from a service road and then crooked unpaved paths. The markers were bent, torn, or discolored. In the end, I followed my nose. The aroma of damp earth and animal excrete intensified, mixing with the perfume of centuries-old pines. The forest closed in, tall trees blocking the residual light of the sunset, creating elongated shadows that danced like spectral figures. I pitched my little explorer's tent in the fading twilight. She was the only one there. I had the place to myself. The silence was absolute, broken only by the occasional rustling of branches or the distant hoot of an owl. I felt vulnerable, but also liberated. It was exactly what I was looking for, or so I thought. After a quick dinner of apples stolen from a previous camp, I recorded my travel journal with the flashlight before bed. I spoke quietly about my adventures for the day, laughing at my navigational mistakes, not knowing that those words would come back to haunt me in the most terrifying way. I don't know how much I slept. I checked the time, but I don't remember what it was. Something had woken me up, but I was too groggy to remember it. I sat in a stupor, too alert to go back to sleep, but too sleepy to be fully awake. The air inside the tent felt colder, heavier, as if the forest had invaded my personal space. Something brushed against the side of my tent, and I was suddenly more awake than ever. The rubbing was soft at first, almost like a breeze, but then it became insistent, as if something tested the fabric, looking for weaknesses. I had camped a lot by then. He knew the sounds of the usual nocturnal animals, from raccoons to coyotes. Nothing had bothered me in my tent before. They just sniffed around and left. But this was no ordinary animal. The pace was too calculated, too human. From the sound of footsteps, he walked on two legs. That was new. My mind jumped to the worst conclusion: a bear. I imagined its sharp claws, its imposing mass lurking in the darkness. My heart was pounding, each pulse amplifying the fear. There's a lot of conflicting information out there about how to deal with bears, and a lot depends on the type. Sitting there in the dark with her heart in her throat, she had no way of knowing which one it was. Scream or play dead? My thoughts were racing. I remembered articles read about black bears versus grizzlies, but in the gloom, everything was mixed into a chaos of panic. It was 30 yards from a sturdy cinder block bathroom that might be a better shelter. As quietly as I could, I put on my boots and prepared to run. The tent closed seemed impossibly noisy at night as I opened it inch by inch. I moved agonizingly slow, each second stretching like an eternity, sweat purling my forehead despite the cold. Once outside, I craned my neck to see if the bear, if that was between me and the bathroom. With the incredible illumination of the Milky Way, I could see the camp clearly down to the tree line. There was nothing there, but the stillness was oppressive, as if the forest held its breath. I felt that something was watching me. It was like feeling an insect crawling down the back of your neck. There was no logical way to know that something had its eyes on me, but there in the dark, in the middle of nowhere alone, I couldn't ignore it. The sensation intensified, an electric tingle that made my skin crawl, making each shadow seem alive. Still on high alert, I crept forward and tried not to creak the gravel under my feet too hard. The bathroom was still my best option. The door was open with a stone, but inside there was a heavy bolt. I would have to spend the night surrounded by the smell of not only horse but human poop as well. But I thought it was a fair exchange for not being mutilated or eaten. Each step was a battle against the noise, my breath ragged, the only sound in my mind. My hand was on the latch when I heard the horrible creak of footsteps in the gravel behind me. I kicked the stone that kept the door open and closed the heavy metal door. No matter the noise, the echo of the slam reverberated through the night, amplifying my terror. Whatever was on the other side had thumbs. Something tugged at the door as it struggled to lock it. I won, but it was just a little. The force was tremendous, as if he were trying to rip the door off its hinges. There was a metal mesh on top of the structure for ventilation. Through her, I heard the snort of heavy breathing that matched mine. It was rhythmic, almost synchronized, as if it imitated me even in that. My phone was in the tent because I'm an idiot. There was no way of knowing the time. The same stupid impulse that got me there kicked in. I had to know. Curiosity fought against fear, a knot in my stomach. Hello? Silence. Maybe they hadn't heard me. And then, hello? I could have shit myself. I was in the right place for that. The voice was feminine like mine, and the sound was a punch to the stomach. It was my voice, exactly my voice, but it wasn't me who was speaking. The perfect timbre, the slight accent, all identical. I froze, my heart beating so hard I thought it would be heard outside. What the hell was that? It could not be an echo. There was nothing that bounced the sound like that in an open bathroom. My mind was racing for explanations. A prankster, a madman, but in the middle of nowhere it seemed impossible. "Who's there?" I asked, trying to sound brave, but my voice trembled. "Who's there?" he repeated. Perfect imitation. It was like listening to a recording of myself, but with a strange tone, almost hungry, a guttural nuance that wasn't mine, as if something twisted added to it. Panic invaded me. He was not human. No person could imitate like this, and even less in total darkness. I curled up on the dirty floor, hugging my knees, waiting for him to leave, but he didn't. He kept muttering words I'd said earlier on my trip, phrases from my video diary that no one else had heard. Every word was a dagger, reminding me how exposed I was. Hours passed. The thing scratched the door from time to time, whispering my name that I had never given it. The scratches were slow, deliberate, as if he enjoyed the terror it caused. At dawn, the sounds ceased. I went out shaking, ran to my tent, picked everything up and fled on my motorcycle. I never camped alone again. Something inhuman lurks in those forests, and it followed me that night. The way back felt eternal, every bend a possible ambush, but I managed to escape, forever marked by that night of pure horror. I'm an avid camper most of my life. More than that, I lived in the Wyoming wilderness for nearly 2 years as a child in a house on a nature preserve, a place where electricity only came from a generator, and we had to boil water that my brothers and I brought from the stream, all before the age of 10. If there were emergencies, it took at least an hour for help to reach or for help to arrive. I've hunted dangerous animals. I'm not particularly proud, but it happened. And seen strange things in the desert. Those years forged me. They taught me to respect nature but not to fear it, to read signs in the wind and footprints. But none of that prepared me for the forests of the Cascades. So when I say that I don't go into the forests of the Cascade Range alone, it's important to know that nature doesn't scare me easily. Those dense trees, the perpetual fog, hide more than just animals. I was 23 years old when a friend of mine, I'll call him Darren, all names altered, invited me to camp. The site was a few miles down a logging road, so an hour's walk from an already remote-as-hell road. It was me, Darren, and his good friend Wade. The place was, from the logging road, about 10 minutes along a trail. The hike was exhausting, with heavy backpacks and the ground slippery from the constant humidity. But the anticipation drove us. The moment we arrived at the site, I was excited. The small lake was beautiful, barely touched by people over the years. I was also comforted to see that in the last month at least one more had camped, extra wood by the stove. We ate a lot of chili and hot dogs. But at sunset the guys went into the woods and came back with a sealed bucket they had buried the year before, and we opened it to get some MREs that they kept in their cache. It seemed like one of the best camping trips of my adult life. The laughter around the fire, the reflection of the stars in the lake, everything was idyllic. That night was different. For the first time in my life I felt a restlessness sleeping in my tent. I couldn't locate her. I attributed it to not being used to camping without my dad. Darren brought his .38 Special for protection against predators, but he was the only one armed. The next day it rained, as it does in the Pacific Northwest, and we tried to wait, but eventually we left it, packed it up and went home. The rain was incessant, turning the path into a quagmire, and that uneasiness persisted in my mind. Fast forward to next year. Darren and I wanted to camp again, and I wanted to give the site another chance. I invested a lot of effort convincing a lot of friends to come. In the end, there were 6 of us and a great white German shepherd, me, Darren, Wade, James, Charles and Rita, James's girlfriend, and Moogie, the dog. Knowing the restlessness of the last time, I brought my 12-gauge shotgun. James wanted to practice unregulated shooting things they don't allow at official ranges, such as full cans and jugs. We also brought a quad bike to carry extra water, alcohol and other supplies to make the weekend more comfortable. The preparation was meticulous, planning every detail to counteract any bad feelings. First day. While riding, we heard a loudspeaker playing music south of the lake, which was basically next to the logging road and visible from the road, unlike the previous year. Deciding that we were big ego Americans, James and I went downstairs to see the source of the noise. Now I have to praise the calmness of the policeman who was just fishing, when 2 big armed men, me with the 12, James with his .308, emerged from the trees. We introduced ourselves. We mentioned the others, but not exactly where we were camping. Only nearby. The encounter was tense, the policeman scanning us with suspicious eyes. That's when things got weird. It could have just been a cop doing cop stuff, but this guy really wanted to know exactly where we would be. He then mentioned his favorite sites nearby, and he really wanted us to try another site 2 miles down the logging road. At one point, it almost suggested that it was the only place where we would not have problems. Darren finally showed up. He said he talked to the owners of the land years ago and they were fine with us there. The policeman got angry, but we lied and said we would see the place he was pushing. His insistence was unsettling, as if he knew something we didn't. None of us trusted the guy when we left, so we decided not to go. It was like a horror movie. Montage. The suspicious cop tells us to go to the place where his hillbilly friends will kidnap us. Vibe. We kept going. Early in the day, so we mounted, lit a fire. We float in our giant inflatable chair boat for 4 people. Highlight of the day. Charles got so drunk that he fell into the lake fully clothed, laughing us all. Laughter echoed in the valley, temporarily dissipating the tension. But as night fell, things changed. We hear distant voices, like people talking. We thought they were echoes of the lake, but they were coming closer. They sounded like us. They mimicked conversations we'd had that day. "Did you hear that?" I said. Everyone fell silent. Then, a perfect voice from Darren. "Yes. What is it?" It wasn't Darren who was speaking. He was next to me, mute. Moogie the dog growled, hair standing on end. We fired into the air to scare away anything, but the voices continued, closer, laughing as we did. The suspense was palpable. The mist rose from the lake, enveloping us in a white veil that distorted the sounds. James loaded his rifle. "Show yourselves," he shouted. Silence. Then, a rustling in the bushes. Something big was moving. I fired my shotgun into the darkness. An inhuman shriek rang out, a blood-chilling sound, like nothing I had heard in my years in the wild. Blood on the ground at dawn, but no bodies. Footprints that changed from human to canine, as if the creature mutated before our eyes. We never knew what it was, but we left that morning. That forest holds dark secrets, and that night it revealed one that still wakes me up sweating. I was camping in the middle of nowhere in Washington, near Mount Rainier. Not in an official camp, just far away in the woods where I didn't expect another human for miles. The terrain was wild, towering pines, exposed roots like traps, and a mist that clung to everything like a ghostly veil. I had chosen this spot because of its isolation, looking for peace in solitude, but that decision became my worst nightmare. One night I wake up and I hear something. I open my tent, and there's a guy sitting where my fire had been, right outside my tent. Nothing particularly noticeable about the guy, just a normal man sitting a couple of feet from my tent, no bag or backpack or anything, just a guy. He saw me open the tent. His eyes widened as if he had seen a ghost, and he ran away. It shook me up a lot, but the next day I managed to get it out of my mind by writing it down as a weird occurrence and a probably stoned guy who somehow coincidentally camped near mine. I tried to rationalize it, maybe a lost hiker, or someone on a psychedelic trip. But the memory of his eyes, wide and empty, persisted. Then, 2 days later, and 10 to 15 miles away in totally random directions that no one could take the same road by accident, I was sitting by the fire that night and began to hear noises that more and more convinced me were from a person. I yelled at them, and out of the darkness someone said, "Do you know how to get to Bell's Canyon?" I said no. I don't even think it's a real place there. They kept talking from just out of my sight. I tried to see them with my flashlight, but they shouted, "Point that the other way," and, somewhat scared and not wanting to anger a possible madman, I did it. After like 15 minutes of being very scared and them asking completely random questions from the darkness, it sounded like the voice had come closer, so I shone my light again. And it was the same guy who had been outside my tent 2 nights before. He had to have followed me almost 15 miles for 2 days because there's no way I could just accidentally end up in the same spot as vast as that nature is. No possible way. As soon as my light shone on him, he ran off again. I started chasing it, but I didn't want to get lost in the wilderness in the dark, so I stopped fast after probably only 100 to 200 feet. This one couldn't be written off, because the only way it would be in both places is if it specifically followed me. The realization struck like a thunderclap. It was no coincidence. It was a deliberate hunt. I decided that the trip ended first thing in the morning and walked back for 3 days, constantly turning backwards, trying to throw anyone off by following me. and occasionally hiding and waiting to see if I would pass by. I can't really describe how terrifying it was to feel like I was being hunted in the woods, and to have to brainstorm things to avoid potentially being killed. Every step was paranoia. Was he behind that tree? Did he hear his breathing in the wind? The forest, once friendly, now looked like an enemy labyrinth. On the first night of walking back, twice I heard what sounded like a person walking circles outside my tent. But by the time I mustered up the courage to look, no one was there. The circles were methodical, like a ritual, increasing my pulse with each turn. On the second night, I heard what I thought was an animal making noises at first in the distance, but slowly decided it sounded more like a human making animal calls. But it could have been a real animal, but I didn't see the guy again. But it really sounded like a person howling. I literally almost cried when I finally got to my car. The relief was so strong. The sound evolved, from growls to howls that mimicked wolves but with a distorted human tone. To date, probably the most terrifying experience I've ever had. I have no idea who the guy was or what his intentions were, and there's no way to get an explanation, but I can't really articulate what terrifying days they were. The turn came on the third night. I heard footsteps again, but this time I saw a shadow pass by. I ran to my car at dawn, constantly looking back. I never knew if he followed me to the end, but I would swear I saw a figure in the rearview mirror as I walked away. Those forests near Seattle are not safe. Something or someone stalks the lonely ones. The return trip was a race against fear, every mile of victory, but the shadows of those days still haunt me in dreams. Phew! What did you think of these stories? If it made your hair stand on end, leave a comment below telling me which one scared you the most, or if you have experienced something similar in the forests. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more true horror stories from the Pacific Northwest, and give a like if you want more episodes like this. See you in the next video, and be careful when camping alone.